Alright, hello small power class. In this video we are further going to break down the difference in operation between 4-stroke and 2-stroke engines. First though, we need to recall those 4 events that we keep talking about and know that both the 4-stroke and the 2-stroke complete all 4, which are the intake, the compression, the ignition and power, and the exhaust events. The second thing we need to know is that when we're talking about strokes, all that means is 1 stroke is each time the piston either moves from top dead center to bottom dead center or bottom dead center to top dead center. Again, 1 motion in 1 direction equals 1 stroke. Now that we know that, let's start with the 4-stroke engine. It's what we're most familiar with and worked with the most in class, and actually it's a little bit simpler and easier to understand, I think. So to start, we'll start with stroke number 1. And this will be the intake stroke. It starts when the piston is at top dead center and will begin to move towards bottom dead center. As the piston moves down, the intake valve will open and air and fuel will suck into the combustion chamber. Stroke number 1. Stroke number 2 is when the piston goes from bottom dead center back towards top dead center. This is going to be the compression stroke. Both valves are closed and that piston is going to compress all of the fuel and air together towards the top. The 3rd stroke begins when the spark plug ignites the fuel, which pushes the piston back towards bottom dead center. This is going to be the ignition and power stroke. This is also when the piston moves and turns the crankshaft. The start of stroke number 4, which will be the exhaust stroke, is when the piston hits bottom dead center and starts going back towards the top. The exhaust valve will open and it'll push out all the exhaust fumes. That's all 4 strokes for the 4-stroke engine, and that's 1 completion or 1 cycle of the engine itself. Now one thing you may want to note is that you realize that there's not always power, and what keeps the piston moving when there's not an explosion is the momentum generated by the flywheel. Now, the 2-stroke engine completes again all those same 4 events, but sometimes it does them simultaneously. So let us start with stroke number 1, which is when the piston will be all the way at the top, and let's assume that the fuel and air is already compressed. So piston's at top dead center, the spark plug ignites the fuel and air and begins to move the piston towards bottom dead center. During this time, this is still stroke number 1, but as the piston is moving down, it'll open up both the exhaust port and the intake port. So still stroke number 1, piston is still going down, but even though it's already exploded, both the exhaust fumes are shooting out and the next batch of fuel and air is coming in. Stroke number 1 is now complete when the piston reaches the bottom, and stroke number 2 occurs when the piston starts to go from bottom dead center back up towards top dead center. During this time, it'll plug up both the intake and exhaust ports and start to compress the fuel and air mixture towards the top. Now, the one thing to note is the next batch of fuel and air is already being prepped in the system by the opening up of a reed valve system in the crankcase. So now we talked that the crankcase in a 2-stroke engine does not contain oil. That's why you must premix oil and fuel. And as that piston goes towards top dead center in stroke number 2, the next batch of fuel and air is prepped to go into the intake port. Hopefully that'll make sense in the diagram I can put over here to the side. If not, I'll answer any questions in class. Again, in review, the 4-stroke engine takes 4 physical strokes, 4 times the piston moving up and down to complete those 4 events, and the 2-stroke engine completes them in 2 physical strokes. It combines events, makes things simpler, and removes all the need for all the external valves and things that weighs them down. With that in mind, let's answer 2 questions in this video. First, I want you to list and describe what happens during each stroke of the 4-stroke engine operation. And the second thing I want you to answer is what happens during each stroke of the 2-stroke engine operation. Deuces.